So I was 16 when I met my ex-husband. He was 38. I got pregnant by him twice at the age of 16. And then 2 months later was when he convinced me that we needed to be married. When I was born, my father had already been abusing my sister for a number of years. So by the time that I was born, I obviously don't know exactly when the abuse started because for a lot of it, I was very, very young. My sister had been going through this abuse with him for many years. And it was when my mom had left for this spiritual quest, as she calls it, around the time I was 4 or 5. I was probably about 4. And so she left the 4 of us with our dad and she went on this like spiritual journey to go find herself. And it was during that time that my sister started to realize like I was sleeping in bed with my dad every night and there was no one in there like as a barrier. Like my mom was not in there sleeping in the bed as well. He always kind of framed it in a way that like it was something he was doing for us. For the most part, my abuse with him was with his hands and mouth on me. My sister did have the worst of it because she was older, so it was, you know, actual with her. And with me being younger, it was more just his hands and mouth that were on me. It was something that was for us, is what he would frame it as. And that was about the time that she went to a school counselor at her school and she told her about the abuse that had been going on in our house for many years at that point. So obviously that was very quickly reported. Things happened pretty quickly once that initial report was made because it was a very concerning situation. He was arrested. I believe he was let out on bail under the agreement that he was not to have any contact with us. So not too long after that happened, he came to the house one night and my mom and him sat us, all 4 of us down. And I was about 5 at this time. And she sat us all down and they talked to us and they said, I need you guys to go pack a bag. We are leaving tonight. And they didn't really give us a whole lot of information outside of that, at least not for me because I was so young. The ultimate goal was to cross the Mexican border and to eventually make our way to Ecuador, where my mom had spent some time previously before she met my father. I guess that was the plan. Luckily, we did not make it across the border. We stopped at a friend of my parents' house in New Mexico. And once she kind of like pieced together what was happening and why we were there, she immediately called the police and they were arrested there. So we were about 4 hours away from the Mexican border at that point when that happened. So then we were put into foster care, emergency placements there in New Mexico. We were not in that home there in New Mexico for very long. So we were living in Hawaii at the time. That was where my mom had moved to when we were in foster care. She decided on a whim she was moving to Hawaii. So that's where we were living at the time. So my oldest brother who helped me out, he was living in Washington. He has never really had a close relationship with our mom. When I was about 11, like late 11 going into 12, that was when I started to dabble with drinking and drugs. It started out with just like pot and drinking. And then when I was closer to 13, that was when I started to dabble with a lot of harder drugs. Had my first like serious boyfriend when I was 13. He was 23. We were together for almost 2 years and he got me heavily addicted to opiates. And it just was like, I just had been filled with so much pain and anger and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't have anyone to talk to. And it was like the first time I tried opiates, everything just went away. It all just went numb. And that's why it was so addicting for me because I no longer had to feel all of this pain that I had been feeling for so long. And so I just kept just going and going so that I didn't have to feel anything. Probably would have ended up dead within a short amount of time the way I was going if I hadn't decided suddenly to make a change. And I never knew at the time like where this decision came from because I was so mentally unwell at the time, not making clear decisions, not having clear thoughts. But I just remember all of a sudden, I just thought, I need to leave this place because if I don't leave this place, I will never get better. So shortly after that, I talked to my brother who lived in Washington at the time. He was out of the military at this point and he was living there. And I called him and I said, can you help me? He was not in a place where I could come live with him at the time, but he did say, if you can find somewhere to stay out here, I will get you a plane ticket. Basically, at the age of 15, just moved across the country, basically worked as much as I could to just get myself sober so that I didn't have time to sit there and think about any of it. like I said, I just worked a lot just to keep myself busy. I wasn't going to school or anything. I was 15 when I moved there. There was a short period of time when I was 15 where I attempted to like kind of be a normal teenager and go to high school and do all these things. I hadn't been in school since the 7th grade because that was when my kind of addiction was just really bad. And then I went to a homecoming party at a friend's house. I was that night by someone who, he was about 21. He had shown up and crashed this, high school homecoming party. I was that night, and he turns out had also another girl that same night at the same party. So I just remember shutting down while it happened. Like, I had tried to tell him no, and he had made a comment to me like, I'm a lot bigger than you. You're not going to be able to fight me off. And I just remember kind of shutting down and just kind of going somewhere else in my own head until it was over. And I just remember just getting so depressed after that, just thinking like, why is this happening to me again? Like, I thought that I was building a better life. I thought that things were changing, and it's happening again. Why is this happening to me, After that, things were not good again. I did not turn back to drugs, but I did start very heavily. And it was during that time that I was really heavily that I met my now ex-husband. So I was 16 when I met my ex-husband. He was 38. I met him through his daughter, who was a friend of mine who was 2 years older than me. He gave me a place to live. That was the first thing he did because I didn't really have anywhere to live at the time. Once I had started working, I had stopped working. So I go and move into this spare bedroom in his house. I was not in that spare bedroom for long because it was very quickly once I was in his home. It was when he started to make the moves on me and manipulate me into thinking that we needed to be together. And I ended up moving into his bedroom at that home. I was not thinking clearly. I was not making good decisions. And it was hard for me. I was drunk all the time. It was very hard to think about things clearly, but it was also hard because I had had such a messed up introduction to, what love looks like, what relationships should look like through my father, through my other relationships that I've had before that. I didn't have the right framework in my mind to think of what a healthy relationship should look like. So there were no red flags going off in my head at the time. I got pregnant by him twice at the age of 16. Both ended up in miscarriages, and then twice again while I was 17. The first time during 17 was another miscarriage. So I had 3 miscarriages, and then I got pregnant with my oldest son. During all these miscarriages and stuff, I didn't have anyone to talk to because, again, I was being isolated. He had told me to cut off contact with friends and all these things, and he had framed it as like, oh, well, I don't think they're good people for you to be around. Oh, I don't think you should talk to that guy. I think he likes you. Like, all these very manipulative ways of why I should not talk to these people anymore until I was so isolated that it was just him in my life. I got pregnant with him. I was about 4 months along when he was like, we have to be married if you're going to have this baby. So I had turned 18 shortly into that pregnancy. And then 2 months later was when he convinced me that we needed to be married. I remember him, it was just very much like, we are getting married. I remember the courthouse was closing in an hour or something. It was very late in the day. And he was like, we're going now. We're going to the courthouse and we're getting married. He brought his father, his elderly father, with us and his daughter. And we went before a judge at the courthouse and we got married. And then went out to dinner to celebrate with his family. So I just thought this must be normal. Physical abuse started after we were officially married. I think it was just, he had his hooks in me. I was pregnant, we were married, and that was when he really just kind of let his full self out, and that was when the physical abuse started. Before that, mental abuse had already been going on for many years. He wasn't working at the time when I was pregnant and we were married. We were living with his dad, and he was kind of paying for everything. And I guess his dad reached a point where he was like, you have another child on the way, you just got married, you need to go get yourself a job and you need to support this family. So he did. He went out and got a job. And we moved away from his daughter and his father to a place where neither of us really knew anyone. So then again, we were in a place where I didn't know anyone and he was the only person that I had. So I was again very isolated. Every time I went out and did anything, and when I say doing anything, I just mean I would go out and go get a coffee or things like this. And it was always you can't spend money like that, you can't do that. I had such a low opinion of myself at this point because I had spent years being degraded by a man and being told I am worthless, I don't deserve anything good in life, that if I were to ever leave him, no one else would ever want to be with me again because I'm a broken person, and that he was basically doing me a favor by putting up with me. It was just hard for me to believe that I did deserve better, especially since so many times it felt like in my life where I had like tried to make better choices, things had just gone downhill again, time and time again. So it just felt like, am I really meant to live a better life than this? Or am I just always just going to be living in some form of abusive relationship? But then I remember watching my son cover his ears when his dad would scream at me, cover his eyes when he would see things. I remember him crying there, watching his dad do things to me. And I just remember looking at him and thinking, I might think that I deserve this, but I know you don't deserve this. That's why I always say that my son was the one who saved my life, because if I hadn't had him, I probably would have ended up dying either at his hands or at my own hands, because it was just so awful. I will be damned if I allow you to watch this growing up thinking that this is normal, and for you to one day become a man who does these things to a woman. So that was what ultimately gave me the strength to leave. I had no money of my own. I had nothing. I contacted my mom, who I had had a very strained relationship with at this point in time, but I had really no one to really reach out to that could get me away from this situation. So I just called her and I just said, can I please come stay with you? Can you please get me a plane ticket? And she didn't have a lot of money, but her and my sister managed to scrounge together enough to get me a plane ticket. She said, you just need to get to the airport. One of my good friends at the time, while my husband had gone to work, she helped me pack a few bags, get just the necessities of what we needed for me and my son, some clothes, birth certificate, things like that, and to go. And that led to like a really long, messy legal battle, because once he realized that like I was no longer under his control and he had lost control of the situation, things just got really ugly. He was just contacting me, making threats against me. He would make threats against my friends who had helped me, and they ended up ultimately having to cut off contact with me because he started making threats toward them. So to protect their own families, they had to stop talking to me. So I was granted divorce. I was granted full custody. I was given a lifelong restraining order against him, and my son has a restraining order until he turns 18. And then when I was about 22, I finally was like, I kind of want to try dating again. I wasn't really looking for anything long-term at this point, and I wasn't looking to get my son involved in any sort of relationship. I was starting to feel a bit lonely at that point. After doing so much work on myself, I had thought like, maybe I could actually have a good relationship one day, maybe he was actually wrong, and maybe I actually do deserve something better than that. So I joined Bumble because I didn't really know like how else am I going to meet someone. I went on a date with Bumble, made a not wise decision, and went back to this man's apartment that he had, and I was that night. It took everything in me to not just like fully succumb to the despair, because it was like, God, it's happening again. How is this happening to me again? And I just felt like everything was just so unfair. I had fought so hard to get away from all of this, and now it's happening again. And a couple weeks later, I made this match on Bumble. I really like went back and forth, like, should I even go to this after what happened last time? Should I even bother putting myself out there? But I just felt like I don't know, I guess just this pulling to just go and just try again. And I did, and it was really good. And we've now been together for 7 years. He really stepped up, became a father to my oldest son after a couple of years, like really stepped up and, became the father that he needed to have. He's the only person he's ever known as dad. We have a second child together who is 4. We are not officially married yet, but we are getting married this February, but we're common law married, but we decided pretty recently that we are going to officially get married. And at this point in time, I had made some good friends, and they were people who were very religious. They are Christians. And I started to look at them, these people who had also gone through things, but they had this kind of hope about them. They didn't succumb to their depression and anxiety the way that I had. And I just thought, man, maybe there's something to it. Because I was kind of at a point where I thought about myself every single day. And this is me being outside of an abusive relationship, in a healthy relationship where I'm raising my children and we are living a good life. We have a man that provides for us. I'm staying home with them. I'm raising my kids. Everything is good. But I thought about myself every single day. You know what? I'm going to try the one thing that I have never tried. And maybe I go to God. Maybe I go to this God who I'm not sure that I even believe in at the time, and just say, can you just take it all? Just take it all from me. To my shock, it worked. I finally felt like I had this hope. I felt like I had this hope, this belonging that I had never felt in my life before. I had always felt like I was living on the outside of everyone, like I never truly belonged to anything or anyone. And even people who I, said they loved me, I never felt like I belonged there. And all of a sudden I felt like, oh, I'm meant to be here. Truly felt like I moved on. I've given forgiveness to the people who have hurt me in my past, because I realized like I deserve to live free of that. I don't need to be thinking about it. And so I gave them forgiveness in my heart. I feel like I've actually healed from these things, and I am not depressed. I'm not on any medications managing it. I just, through the power of God, feel like I have truly healed myself, and I feel good.